Hey everyone, welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig.
I'm Holden.
I'm Benz.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. Today, looking at OSHA regulations, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration. This organization regulates workplace safety. Holden and I have differing views on this. I believe that while big government is bad, there's a place for limited common sense regulations that protect workers, while Holden's position is...
it's the violation of property rights to tell companies what they can or can't do with their property as long as they're not violating somebody else's property rights.
Understandable. And then, Bence, how do you feel on this issue?
Regulations are very important. However, they should not be limiting a company's ability to make money. So there should be a sort of balance where we kind of make sure that the companies don't go out and kind of make people die. So we've seen many people die in the 1900s with no regulation. But as regulation has been implemented, workplaces have been safer. So we do need regulations, but we should not overregulate because that just is not good for anyone.
Agree, and that's roughly my position too, that I don't want to be over-regulating and causing businesses to go under en masse, but it is important to maintain a safe workspace, say by ensuring that workers are secured to a harness if they're over 6 feet above ground, so that if they fall, they are safe from death or injury. But Holden, how would you handle workplace safety ideally?
It's not my job to tell a company what they can or can't do. It's their property. They do whatever they want with their property. If they happen to be violating, if they happen to be doing stupid things and that are unsafe for workers, then nobody's going to work there. So the reason people worked there in the 1900s was not because we didn't have, or the reason people were dying back in the 1900s or before then in the Industrial Revolution was not because we didn't have regulations. It had nothing to do with that. It's the fact that our capital equipment was much lower quality and it was much more dangerous to operate the capital equipment back then and the machines back then because they weren't as high quality. And actually putting regulations on companies inhibits a company's ability to increase capital. So you're actually hurting the workers in the long run. Now, we have increased capital a lot since then, and so working conditions are much better than they used to be. And of course, that's the natural order of things. People are going to be safer because machines are doing slave labor for us. That's much more dangerous, much more intensive. And over time, as machines and capital increases, workplace conditions will be much more safe. And we've seen capital increase thanks to the partial part of capitalism we have today, or we've had since the Industrial Revolution. But that's not because of regulations that workplace fatalities are decreasing per capita. It has nothing to do with that.
I agree with the fact that the machines are safer now today with the increased capital. But without regulations, my concern is that they wouldn't put in, say, machine guarding. There would be companies that just don't invest in the safety of their workers. And not everyone is going to be able to work at an employer that values their safety. It's a question of, yes, there's a lot of areas with competition, but some people live in rural areas. Some people live in a town where there's only one big employer in the whole area. And if that company doesn't care, then that's a problem for the workers. And, with death or injury, you could hurt the economy in that manner.
Once again, you're not going to be able to make companies more. It's not how you do it. You let the market figure it out. If there's a company that's violating if they're not making safe work conditions for workers, then that's an opportunity for another competitor to open up a business that does the same thing and then hire all those workers that had unsafe working conditions. And you just let the market figure this stuff out. It's not the government's role to, once again, tell companies what they can or can't do with their own property, as long as it's not violating other people's property rights.
Mm-hmm. Bence, what do you think? Would that make sense?
Yeah, no. So what I think is that we need regulations to kind of go off of. So, for example, if someone gets hurt at the workplace, there should be some sort of regulation that says, okay, this person has not been in the best area, so they've not been protected, and so they can sue the companies. But if there are no regulations, then what do we go off of, right? So if I break my leg while I'm working, there's no insurance that I'll my medical bills will be paid for, right? So there should be something to kind of make sure that if I get hurt, I will be the company will face some sort of
fine or
there's going to be a fine towards the company, and I'm going to be I'm going to be paid for my medical issue, and also I'm going to get some sort of insurance.
Mm-hmm. Understandable. So Holden, if there is a workplace injury, would someone be able to sue the employer for negligence, or would that?
It depends. Someone could fall just because they don't have strong hips and they fall on their leg or something and they break their leg. There's going to be things that you take a risk walking out of the door and living every day, and there's going to be problems. But of course, if people are dying because they're breaking their legs or whatever because employers aren't taking the correct safety precautions, no one's going to work there once again. So nobody's going to work there. If they actually inflicted that violence upon somebody, then of course that's an opportunity for them to sue them or whatever. But if without the violation of property rights, if somebody is willingly working in an environment as a grown adult, making an adult decision, acknowledging that there's risk, right? You walk out of the door every day, there's a risk someone will shoot you. You don't know. Like, if there's something that clearly was a violation of property rights, that's where you stand in, or violation of your self ownership, then that's where you would have legal stuff step in. But without that, the company just isn't going to be able to hire people if they're not taking care of their workers.
Understandable, though I think the advantage with certain regulations is that the research is done for the companies, because not every company is going to know what an ideal safety procedure should be. So if that's already established, then there's a minimum standard that a company may not invest in or know how to invest in if they're left to their own devices. If a company, say, wants to keep its employees safe, but doesn't necessarily know what regulations, self-regulations, they would want to put on themselves to do so, then that could present a problem.
It's in the best interest of the companies to hire the best talent. If they want to have the best talent, they need to make sure their work conditions are safe. So if that happens to be a thing that is worth investing in, then the market's going to be able to solve that problem much better than the government will. And the existence of government is the violation of property rights. They have to steal money or confiscate money to fund themselves in the first place. So in order to pass these stupid regulations and have bureaucrats decide what's good or bad, they literally have to violate property rights in the process. And then it's violating property rights even more when they tell companies what they can or can't do, or what their workers can or can't do. It's a voluntary transaction. I'm saying I want to work for you because I believe that the benefits outweigh the cons. Out of all the opportunities I have, I could be doing leisure, or I could just work for myself. Clearly, if you're working for a company, it's the best opportunity based off of all the opportunities you have that you believe is possible based on your subjective value. And you should be able to go through that without some coercive authority saying that you can't do that. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Okay. Bence, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that what Craig is saying is that the government kind of has like a standardized system, what companies follow, and then that works for every company. And what Holden is saying is that the companies go through this process where they figure out what is the most cost-efficient way of getting workers to be safe while being as cheap as possible. And I think the main issue with Holden's view is that there is a certain time that it takes for the companies to figure it out. And for that time scale, there's going to be accidents. There's going to be people who are going to suffer some sort of injury or maybe mental injury. And so if this process of figuring out how we can make sure that people are safe while we are very cost effective can be minimized, then I think Holden's approach is actually better.
Understandable. It certainly, from my perspective, if you have limited regulations that aren't overly burdensome to the company, but can keep the workplaces safe so that you don't have unnecessarily avoidable injuries, then that can benefit both the worker and the employer, because they know what they have to do to keep their employees safe, and the employees have a safe working environment that they can do their jobs in without worry of an injury on a regular occurrence.
Your assertion implies that work conditions will not be safe without a coercive authority regulating the companies. So that's your position.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's ridiculous.
That would be the case for some companies.
And it's not true.
Even though, for instance, you did mention in the past that we didn't have as much capital, the machines weren't as good,
yes,
but you would still have companies that are like that. And even back then, without the regulations, though the machines weren't as good, they didn't invest in the safety equipment that they could have, because there were, low-cost solutions back then to keeping workers safe. And not all employers, a lot of them, didn't do that. You see people in New York City, for example, 100 years ago, building the skyscrapers, and they're just standing on the steel beams 500 feet up.
Yeah, I mean, life used to suck back then. We had very little options. We had very little capital. I mean, we were extraordinarily poor for basically all of human history. And very recently did we become rich enough to have a luxurious life. And that has nothing to do with regulators. It has to do with companies engaging in capital investment to make sure that work conditions could be safe in the first place while still being effective at increasing your own output. per unit of input. So, I mean, you don't need a coercive authority for this. That's definitely my position.
Okay. I suppose what I noticed in looking at that time period is that it took the regulations for them to invest, because that wasn't necessarily a profitable item for them. They weren't necessarily going to get more customers or clients that way.
Well, they have to retain employees. If they don't have workers, it's done. Like, they have to have the workers do this stuff, and no one's going to work for you if you're doing this crap.
That's true, but people still did work for them.
Yeah, but that's because that was their best opportunity. Once again, I mean, life sucked. Okay, you could work for, your options were not as good as we have today. All right, so you could work for yourself and you can make basically nothing because you don't have any capital, or you could work for a company, and there are risks if you work there, but it's your decision based off of what you think is better. And people decide to do that. I mean, they didn't have very many options, I guess they did have a lot of options, but their options just weren't as good, is the point. And so today, you don't have that same, thankfully, you don't have that same, in the vast majority of the world. Still some places in the world, like in Africa, a lot of places or whatever, you would still have that stuff. But in an economy that's growing and where capital is increasing, it's just going to get more and more safe over time. And the competitive market will regulate companies out of business by themselves, by just the companies that take care of their employees are going to do better than the ones that don't. And so it's in their best interest to take care of their employees.
What can you tell us, say, about your thoughts on your belief that the government is violating property rights in this instance? How concerning is that to you, and why?
I mean, it's very concerning. I mean, the only way that we could, the way that you let the economy grow and increase, and the way that you let capital increase is through property rights. You have economic calculation. That you could only have economic calculation through property rights, really. So you want companies, entrepreneurs, to be able to do what they think is best, and the ones that do well are going to be rewarded, and the ones that don't are going to be punished. So you want that's why property rights are important for those reasons. It's the only way you really perform economic calculation. That's actually how the economy is going to be able to grow, and you're going to be able to increase capital. If you don't, then you're just going to have a coercive authority that's deciding what they think is best, allocating capital, and they're going to suck at it, and there's going to be massive distortions, and there's going to be mass poverty and likely mass famines. So it's you want economic calculation, you want property rights that's going to allow for better capital allocation. Everybody's going to be richer, things are going to be better off, and it's going to be way better that way.
Interesting. Okay, definitely seeing your point about maximizing capital. Bence, I want to leave you with the closing thought. What do you think overall?
Overall, the main point here is that companies are very good at being very efficient. We can look at SpaceX. SpaceX is taking up more people into space than anyone else in the world. And that has been done because Elon Musk basically took his company and he looked at what is the most efficient way of building the whole rocket, and he managed to do it for a lot less than NASA or the Chinese or the Russians. So we do need to trust the companies, but we need to have the companies be accountable for their actions. We need to somehow hold them accountable for what they're doing, and that is a very important point, because if we just let the companies run around and do whatever they want, they might like form an alliance where they say, okay, nobody's going to have any sort of like safety regulations, and then and any new company that forms joins this alliance, and then the workers are not going to have a chance to be safe in the workplace. So we need to hold the companies accountable, but also we need to let the companies do what they want to do.
Interesting. Well, that being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1 p.m. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out at youthbombs@alatrorepublicans.com. Thanks so much, everyone.